Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're watching from. We are live with National Quilter Circle, and we are working on a project that has a Valentine kind of flair to it. It could also be used in many other ways if you decide to add other colors, but I'm Colleen Tauke, I'll be your instructor, and our project is called Love Multiplied. This is the project that we're working on, and you will find the pattern for this will be in the chat portion underneath of me. You will see there that we have the pattern available for you to download free. If you've already done that, that's great. If you have not, you can always go back to it or find it under the More tab, under the videos and the comments there for this video. So you can always pick up that pattern at a later point. Do remember that you are welcome and very encouraged to jump into the chat section under the video here and tell us where you're watching from. If you've done something similar to it, what colorway maybe you would love to do it in. But let us know that you're out there and that you're watching. We love the interaction with our quilters from coast to coast and beyond, because we reach basically the entire planet. It is fun to have our quilt community brought together to work on some of these fun projects every other week. So that being said, coming up in February, at the very beginning of February, Craftsy and National Quilter Circle has a product preview showcase coming up. So be looking for that coming up February 1st. It's always fun to have something to learn about, a new tool or a product out there, so that maybe you can add that to your wheelhouse of our stash of tools, because a lot of us have been in quilting for a long time. We rely on certain tools, but sometimes there's something that can make our life more fun, a different variation on a product that we haven't seen before, or if we're new to quilting and we haven't had a chance to see the array of things that are out there. This is a great way to learn about things that you might like to purchase and have. Kelly says hello from Arizona. Welcome, Kelly. Giselle says good morning from Wolverton, Ontario, Canada. There's our Canadian quilter. Melissa says hello from Georgia. And let's see, I've got Marianne saying hello from Foggy. I got to be able to see it here. Tiki Island, Texas. I wonder where that's at. I'm going to have to Google that one. That sounds like a fun place. Cecile says good morning from Webster, New York. I'm sorry. And Jan says hello from Iowa. Barbara from Florida. See, we've got the Midwest, we've got the coast, we've got our international quilter, and I bet there is going to be a whole bunch more. Cindy saying hello from Ponca City, Oklahoma. And I actually know where that is because I lived in Oklahoma for a little while. Cynthia saying greetings from San Jose, California. It's probably a little warmer there than it is here. We have freezing rain. So, you know, it's time to stay in and quilt. We had snowstorms and blizzards, and I have been making projects like crazy and designing some really fun projects. So we are so glad that you are here. Cynthia says thank you for the wonderful pattern. You're welcome. It seems to lend itself and using scraps. Perfect. Scrappy would be fun. And let's talk about that pattern and what we need to put together something like this. Now, in the past, I've done one that was called My Woven Heart. And I did pastels. I did something that I had in my fabric bin. And My Woven Heart, just to give every quilt a story, because it's fun to know how designers come up with these crazy ideas. But I have 4 kids. So this is My Woven Heart. This is my base, right? Well, if you follow and you know my crazy life, now my love is multiplied because those 4 kids are now all married. And so it expanded. Isn't that funny how if you start with something and you love something really well, sometimes it just expands and multiplies. So we're up to 4 kids and 4 in-laws now. So now we're at the 8 mark. And all of these little dots out here, who knows? Maybe those are stand for the grandkids in this household. So Becky says hello from Spokane, Washington. Maria says hello from Brazil. Yay. There's another international quilter. And then there's Bridget from France. And Lisa says hello from Wisconsin, that Midwest person. Yes, perfect. So we are drawing our community together to work on a fun project. Now, the fabrics within this. If you're going to go scrappy, that is great. Just be thinking a little bit about values, because values can make a really big difference in the impact of the overall look in a project. So for this one, I selected, and now if you really know me, I selected a couple of fabrics when I was shopping because I'm like, Valentine fabric is going to disappear quickly. So I just grabbed a couple of chunks and said, I'll figure it out later, which is okay, but make sure that when you grab those chunks of fabrics, you grab enough fabric to get done maybe what you want to create. I came close, but I had enough. I padded my yardage a little bit. Judy says, wet and windy here in the UK. Oh, perfect. But we're glad that you're here because you know what? Wherever quilters gather, it's warm and sunny. So just don't look out the window for a little while. And Donna says, hello from Chicago. Perfect. And yes, these do look like Swedish hearts. And I have no Swedish background at all, but I love the look of this design. And Shelby says, hello from Kennewick, Washington, I believe, WA. Man, those things you learned in grade school about the abbreviations of states, you really have to reference sometimes in your life. Okay, so for this project, you need a background fabric that will let your fabrics really read well. So this is actually a white, and as I get close to the camera, you can see little pink circles on it. So it's not really dots, it's just little loops, it gives some texture. And then in order to make the hearts, you need something that gives you some contrast. So if you're going to do scrappy, think about some contrast. It doesn't have to be stark. This one was very subtle between the print and the solid light pink. And then I decided to go a little more like lipstick pink on this version. And this is the fabric that I originally purchased. So I started with this light pink that has some darker pink in it, some red in it. And I did contemplate going red, but it just seemed a little too much for me. And then I ran across this really fun hot pink. And if you can't catch it on camera, the dots on this are actually like a metallic dot. So it was just so fun. I couldn't resist. So the hot pink dot became the contrast for the little woven hearts. And then I needed a fabric to put in the center as it draws together and kind of the dots on the outer edge, just to kind of meld the fabrics together. So I picked a pink that kind of picked up some of the pink in the print, but was still okay with the dot fabric, but not super, super close. It has to have some variation just to give texture as it moves from one portion of the quilt to the other. So those are the fabrics that I selected. You can have fun deciding what you would like to make your hearts out of. Now, when we get into the pattern, I'm trying to think and see if there's anything. Most of the supplies for this are things that you were probably already going to have. You're going to have that longer ruler so you can cut strips across the width of fabric, and everything else, marking tools and threads like that, you probably have in your stash of items in your studio already. So then it just gets down to cutting the pieces and how to approach this. So if you had downloaded the original My Woven Heart, the small square version of this, because it was so small, I didn't have you cut strips. I just had you cut some squares, because by the time you strip pieced anything together, it was almost more work than just to make these 4 little 9 patches. But when you're getting into making 8 of them, when you have to make multiples of things, sometimes we go for techniques that help us go a little quicker. So in this version, I've changed up and done strip piecing to create the pieces that we need for our 9 patches. Okay, we have Eloise from Aurora, Illinois watching, and Karen saying hello from Northwest Indiana. Joanne from Toronto, Canada. I knew there would be more Canadians. We have a lot of quilters in Canada. We're so glad you're here. Kathy says, good morning from Saskatchewan, Canada. See, they're out in force. They're just like us. They love new projects and having fun together. So you're going to create strip sets, 2 different kind of combinations, because you're going to be cutting pieces for the outer strip here, which is 2 pink and a dark pink and a lighter pink. And then you're going to cut twice as many of those because of the combination. Maybe it's easier to see on just the individual here. Let's put it up. The outer sides, these are strip pieces you're going to cut off. So you're going to need twice as many of those as with the lighter pink on the outside, the hot pink in the middle. But by cutting the number of strips I have, because I've tested it, it's easy to create those strip sets so that you can cut your pieces off of that. Now, that being said, whenever you're creating strip sets, make sure that as you join 2 pieces together, you go back and press that seam open before you add the 3rd side, because it's just easier to get in with an iron to press open one. If you've got 2 seams going on that both need to be pressed out, it's like nudging it back and forth, and you tend to move your iron in kind of an ironing pattern back and forth, which can distort your fabric. Remember, we always want to press. So if you take and join 2 pieces together first and then press the seam open, and in this case, I'm pressing the seam allowances toward the brighter pink. If you're doing scrappy, you're going to have to come up with maybe the same version. Go press the seam allowances out here when you're doing the outer pieces. When you're doing the center little unit, you're going to need press your seam allowances toward the center. But if you're changing your fabrics up, you might want to draw yourself a little diagram so that you remember which direction to press your seams. I always like nesting seams. It always makes my intersections look so much better, like I really, really am good at piecing. And remember, it's a lot about the tricks that we use that make us look really great. So by pressing after you join 2 strips, you'll get a nice straight strip set. Add that 3rd, do the pressing there. It also gets you up out of the chair, moving to the iron, because we tend to sit too much and we need that motion. It's good for our bodies. So strip sets, making sure you are pressing in between as you join pieces. And then when it comes to the cutting of different sections, let's see if I have a larger ruler stashed away underneath. Oh, I'm going to have to use this one. Okay, when we go to the cutting, because sometimes people are like, well, I cut one little piece at a time. And you can do more pieces than that by using a larger ruler. Got one here. And you're going to be cutting 2.5 inch or 1.5 inch. Now I got to remember what size the segments are. 1.5 inch segments. That's what happens when you work on multiple projects. And all of a sudden you're thinking, what size am I cutting? So you have to go back and reference your pattern before you make a mistake. I've had about 4 or 5 projects floating all at the same time, back and forth. Now, if you're new to quilting, cutting 1 piece at a time is okay to do because you're just confident of where your lines are, keeping everything straight and lined up. Once you get more confident in your cutting and measuring skill, you can do multiple kind of cuts, which means that you're going to multiply 1.5 in your head. So 1.5 times 2 is 3. So 3 inches would give you 2 pieces that you can cut in half then. And if you get even more confident, 3 times 2 is 6. So if I were to have a ruler that allows me to see 6 inches, I will slide my ruler onto the strip set, align this with a cut edge at the beginning. If it's crooked, we can overcut, which means surpass that end, and I'm going to go back and clean it up at the end. I'm going to take off a 6-inch piece here. So I'm going to be cutting multiples. It's kind of like a slide rule. I've cut off this chunk that I know I can cut into at least 4 units. I'm going to pick up my ruler, rotate the piece. Now remember I said I overcut it because the end wasn't exactly squared up the way I want it to be. that new cut that I made was nice and square. So I can put that at my 6-inch line. Use the lines on your ruler, match them up with your seam lines and the outer edge of your strip set. And I'm going to do a cleanup cut. Just a little bit there so that I know this is now a nice clean 6-inch piece. Now I'm going to back up my ruler 1.5 inches. Remember, we're cutting units 1.5 inches. So 1.5, sliding it back, lining it up at the end of my strip set, using the lines on my ruler to align on my strip set, and then I'm going to cut off a unit. And then back it up 1.5 inches and cut again. And for the last one, back it up 1.5 inches. If you're new to quilting, maybe that's just like way too much. But if you've been quilting for a while, start thinking of ways to make things go a little quicker. There are 4 units ready to go so that we can put together 9-pinch units. So it's that multiplying of fractions that we learned in grade school, and we thought we were never going to use it again. And guess what? If only we would have known we were going to be quilters back then. So this is the middle unit for my 9-patch, and I need just one of those. So I'm going to line that up. And I have so many pieces extra, I could probably make almost another table runner. Getting ready for video is always multiple units. So there we go. We've got enough. We can make a couple of 9-patch units. Then it comes down to the piecing. And here is kind of the double check on whether or not your 1/4 inch is really nice and even, because these are small. We can do a little check at the end to see if the center, because this is 1.5 inches, we're going to take a 1/4 inch seam allowance off both sides. So that very center square should be 1 inch square when we're done. And remember opposing seams? We press the seam allowances on these pieces toward the outer edge and this one toward the center. So as we put these on, we'll have opposing seams, and they should lock up if we were very consistent in our piecing of our strip set, so that we have those opposing seams to lock up in the very center, and we can create our 9-patch quite quickly. Now, in the cutting, it talks about how many units of each you need, and then you could sit down and you could piece all 8 of the 9-patch units all at once, so that you kind of chain piece that. Now, when you get 2Zs put together, remember which side to put this guy on, this last third piece. Because if you go over here, you're not going to get the design that you're looking for, plus you won't have opposing seams, which then is the clue of, I've got that in the wrong place. So making sure you put it to the correct side. I am going to finger press this back. Now, in actuality, I should take it to the iron and iron it, but just for time here, I'm going to finger press this open. Again, that's the idea, is get that nice and flat and out of the way so that it's got a memory already that it needs to go outward. And then we can add that second side and pray for really good intersections. I did do a chain piecing style when I was putting this together, so I was running pairs through in a big long clothesline down behind my sewing machine so that I could get through making all of them at once. 2Zs and then back to do the third side. Okay, all the threads out of the way. And then we're going to finger press this back. I'm going to make sure my iron is good and hot. I love the irons today because they have an automatic shut off so that you don't forget to turn off your iron. But if you're working on a project for a long time in the studio, sometimes it shuts off on you in the middle of a project. So we've got that finger pressed open, and then we're going to set that seam so we create that really nice 9-patch piece for the center. And it was warm, but not super hot. So, okay, let's go back and double check that very center. And let's see, I put away my board to show you up close. Let's hope, as this sticks down, that that center is a 1-inch square. Not bad. Okay, here we go. See, by putting my ruler on there, I'm double checking that very center piece to see if I'm really staying accurate, because all of us tend to get confident in where our 1/4 inch seam is, and sometimes we get in a hurry, but by doing that double check, it's a little bit of a humble pie that we are staying accurate with our patchwork, because the engineering, the math that goes into these really will not allow you to, well, it allows you to fudge a little bit, but not too much. So once we have our 9 patches created, we have 2 other units in our project that we need to create. And I think, I'm trying to think, see here, quick, if I had, oh, I jumped to the 9 patches right off. Okay. Let's see, the corner units are next. Let's work on the corners. These are the pieces that we kind of insert here. We've got the center piece. Let's go over to the corner units. And those are very easy piecing again, so that we're creating this little piece like this, 2 squares and a rectangle. Now, in order to kind of do a repetitive thing, make sure that this really won't matter which direction they're pieced. If it's the white goes on one side or the other, here or here, the rectangle still needs to go onto it so that you get the pink out to the outer edge and you can turn it properly for the alignment here. So since I'm kind of a monster that says, oh, I'm just going to lay them all out alike and then I make them all identical, this would be how I will go about it. I guess in the diagram there, we have the pink, the color, a background, and background. And you can, again, chain piece this, put the 2 squares together. And I know these are little pieces. Some of us aren't really used to working with small pieces, but they take just as much care to put them together as you do large pieces. Sometimes it's a little harder to manipulate if you're used to working with larger units, but these little pieces together, make sure your seaming is correct there. Press your seam allowance. I press my seam allowance toward the pink fabric here. And then once those 2 are joined, then join the rectangle. And to keep you honest, once these 2 are joined, the math should match up to that 2.5 inch rectangle that goes along the one side. And then the pressing on that, of course, least resistance. If you were to press the seam allowance toward the 2 squares, you're bending back on the seam, which is not the direction of least resistance. It wants to, it'll kind of buckle and always pop up on you. It's easier to press toward the rectangle, and then you get a flatter unit when you're working on it. So making 8 of those. Then the last piece that we have to put together, I guess I should keep one of those out for later. The last unit that we need to make are the heart tops. In order to make those, we are working with rectangles of fabric. So we are going to make half of them with one fabric and half with another, so that a print and a dark pink go on the top of one on each of the 2 hearts as the fabrics weave together. So if you're doing scrappy, each of the hearts themselves may need to be 1 fabric or 2 fabrics, so that you weave them together and see the weave of it, so that this fabric matches what's weaving through and this fabric sees what's weaving through the other direction. Okay, so in this case, you're doing a 3.5 by 2.5 rectangle. Let me pick up one here. And then you're going to use 2 squares of fabric to create these little triangles up here. Now, cutting triangles would not be the thing to do at this point. These are very small, and it's much easier to do a diagonal seam across the corner using squares. So what we're going to do is we take those 2 light squares. We're going to take a small ruler, a straight edge, and we're going to mark them corner to corner. Now, that being said, I will have to say that in my studio upstairs, I have a sewing machine that has a laser light or a projector light, depending on what kind of machine you might have. If you have that option on your sewing machine, this is the time to implement it. because you can set that projection line or laser line so that it shoots ahead of where you're stitching, and you can line up that laser line across the triangle, and you don't need to mark any of your triangles. You would just lay that line so it lines up on your square and stitch from corner to corner across it once you have it with your heart top. So in order to cheat, that was kind of a aha moment on how to use that laser line to my advantage. And it doesn't project a long ways ahead, but enough that I could work on the small squares for this project. So if you need to mark, this is the way I've done it for years and years and years. Your lines are going across the block, corner to corner. You're putting these up into two adjacent corners so that they go outward like this, not into the center of the rectangle, but reach from corner to corner, and they're along a long side of the rectangle. And then all we need to do is stitch right on the line. This is easy sewing because you don't have to worry about your 1/4 inch seam allowance. At this point, you just follow the line, which means I need to have my needle in the center position. There we go. We get very used to having our machine in that 1/4 inch seam setting, and as you go to stitch, you all of a sudden realize, wait, I need my needle in the center position because I'm just following a line in order to create the diagonal seams for this unit. Okay, get the second side, get it aligned as I slide it under the machine, making sure that as I jump onto, I have a little spider or whatever you want to call it, a little piece of fabric. My machine likes to take steps into fabric, not into nothing, and it makes a cleaner seam if I use that first and then jump onto my project. So I jump onto corner to corner, get that one stitched, and then trim all of those wily little fabric or threads so that we have a very neat and tidy. I'm not one for leaving lots of thread tails behind. Set the seam to get that warmed up so that when you want to bend those squares back, it has the fabric's been warmed up and they bend really nicely then. Okay, so I'll show you my diagonal seams. There we go. And then I'm going to bend these back to reveal the shape that we're trying to create, like this, kind of like the rooftop of a house. And one side at a time, I've left the underneath fabric there in place, and I'm just going to use my fingers to kind of roll that all the way back to the stitching line, and then I'm going to come in and press. Now, the reason why I leave the underneath portion until after I've pressed is it gives me an idea of where my triangle should actually reach to. And then I can go back and trim away the excess fabric underneath. Here we go. See how that pressed out nicely, nice and crisp. Then you can just take a simple scissors and we can go underneath and trim away the bottom 2 layers. Make sure that you have your scissor in the right place to just trim away those extra triangles and leave about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you have those all done, then it's basically, let's construct a heart. So we have the 9 patch for our center, the woven part of our heart. Now I constructed all of my hearts in the same orientation and then just did a turning all the way around at the table topper. It was just easier if I made them all alike than to try and mix it up too much, so that otherwise I might ended up with 2, one orientation and the other 6 another orientation. So in this case, just simplest to do them all alike, and then it's twist and turn, get them all the way around the table topper. So we are orienting this little tiny triangle to our square to the outer edge. We've got 2 of the heart tops and the 9 patch. In order to construct this, it's stitch these 2 together, then these two together. It's like making a 4 patch. We have 4 units we have to bring together. So we're making rows and then join these together. Pressing, I'm pretty sure in the instructions that I told you, press seam allowances in one section toward the heart top. This one, least resistance, goes toward that heart top, and then you'll have opposing seams here in order to create the actual heart itself. Once it's completely joined, it looks somewhat like that. There we go. There's your heart. Now, in order to create the entire table runner, here we go. This, then I have, basically it's just sashing to put things together. So there are sashing bars to create an entire row. Sashing bar here to create an entire row. And then a long sashing and a cornerstone with another sash to go out down the center, and then you can join row 1, 2, and 3 together. The border looks a little bit more like almost like a sashing. It has just the white with a little tiny square at the corners. So follow the directions on how to attach that. It's not what you consider a typical border. A lot of times borders are something continuous color that frame it. This kind of just lets all the hearts just float on the runner, and then went back with the dark pink to do the binding, that last pop of color. Now, a lot of people will ask about quilting. So just a second, let's see what we've got here. We've got, Judy says, you have a new, a new iron? Nope, not a new iron. This iron has been around for a very long time. It happens to be a Maytag cordless iron, which I don't think they make this exact one anymore. But for video, it's really nice not to have a cord in my way. But there are other cordless ones on the market. The only thing is, know that cordless irons have to go back to their base in order to keep them at a really hot temperature. So if you're thinking about going cordless, just remember you always have to take it back to its base to get it warmed up. But when you're pressing a large quilt top at your ironing board, it is nice not to have a cord tangled into your quilt when you're trying to do that last press. Maybe before you're going to take it to the long armor, or you're going to be quilting it yourself, or you've just put borders on or joined long rows together. But it has a limit on how hot it will stay before it has to go back to its base. So just remember that, okay? Let's see. That pretty much covers everybody's questions. Okay, if you have any other questions, pop in before we finish here. I do want to look at the quilting just really quickly, because sometimes we get down the project and we're like, how do I quilt it? I have no idea where to go with the quilting. And on this one, I decided I wanted to do the crosshatch on the heart again. I had done that on the original version, and I really like the way it just gives that texture to the heart and it lets it be the focus. So I did the crosshatch on the heart. And when you go to do these, it's kind of, maybe it's just me, but I was a kid who loved spirograph and those kind of drawings, or those puzzles where you work your way through and see if you can get all the way through on one touch of the needle or the pen. And it's always a challenge to see if you can do all the stitching maybe in one direction and then come figure out how to travel in the ditch, which means out here between the actual pieced section and the sashing, travel to where then maybe you can do one more pass and try to do all of the quilting in that direction without breaking thread a lot of times. So maybe it's just me. I'm not sure. Maybe you also feel the same way. Okay. Then, so all the cross hatching is done on the heart itself. And I had done some ditch stitching out here because this seemed like it was a little too puffy and looked kind of like it got ignored. So I went in the ditch around the outside edge where the sash, or the border, I guess, is at. And when I got done, it just seemed like this was a little puffy here. So I gone around the little pink square, but then I did a V to almost make it look like the top of a perfume bottle or kind of a queen symbol. So if you look really closely, you can see that there's kind of a V. I went from the corners here all the way down, kind of touching the heart, so that it kind of has a little spark coming off of the heart itself, is the quilting there. And the one thing that I always kind of like to think about a little when I go to pick backing fabrics is there a way I could use this table topper or quilt and enjoy the backside as much as the front? And Valentine's comes and goes very quickly. And February is a month where we have 3 birthdays in our family. And so in order to celebrate those birthdays, I use the cupcake fabric on the back as a fabric that we could flip it over and maybe set our cake in the center or gifts or something on the table, so that it has kind of that party feel of birthday celebration, possibly to the backside of this table topper. So kind of think about that. It doesn't have to be matchy. It has the hot pink in it, but maybe a double use, because we're quilting it and enjoying one side, we may as well enjoy the back side also. So think about that maybe a little bit as you are selecting those backing fabrics for your project. So Christy says, that's a smart idea, a great way to reuse a project. Right, exactly. I have done things where I put Valentine on one side and St. Patrick's Day on the back side. The only thing is that the quilting has to be decided usually by the pieced side of the quilt. Here, it really won't matter to anybody if there are gifts laying on this or a cake sitting in the middle of it, because the cake is the center of attention and not the table runner. So there's always a way to maybe do two, double duty, so that you get value off both sides of a quilt. Okay, so if we don't have too many other questions, remember the pattern is in the comment section so that you can find the pattern for Love Multiplied. And then remember to kind of put a reminder out there, maybe in your phone, for February 1st for the showcase, so that you can join us and learn what National Quilter Circle and Craftsy want to share with you in a product showcase, so that you maybe learn about a new tool or a new item out there that you want to maybe investigate and purchase. So I will be back in 2 weeks, so that I'm bringing you another Valentine themed kind of project. Valentine's Day comes and goes quickly. That's why I wanted to bring this to you early enough so that you would have time to do it. The next project is going to be with triangles, and it could be interpreted in many different versions. So it could be a quick Valentine project, or it could be the inspiration for a baby quilt or a throw or a wall hanging. So join me in 2 weeks. Thanks again.